In the early 1960s, 3 of NPB's 4 Kansai-based clubs saw an American pitcher suit up at the front end of their rotation. The Nankai Hawks had Joe Stanka, the first American to win Pacific League MVP. The Hanshin Tigers had Gene Bach, the first American to throw a no-hitter in the NPB era, and the first to win the Eiji Sawamura Award. And the Kintetsu Buffaloes had Glenn Mickens, who changed how NPB was scored. Mickens joined the Kintetsu Buffaloes in 1959 after toiling on the Dodgers AAA team for 5 years, never being able to make it back up to the majors after his cup of coffee in 1953. A Buffalo scout saw him playing for the Victoria Rosebuds and asked if he'd like to join the team. Mickens agreed. The freshly renamed Buffaloes were coming off the worst season by a team in NPB history, so it could only go up from there. They were still terrible in 1959, but it wasn't Mickens' fault, as he took over as ace of the staff and put up a 2.42 ERA, good for 7th in Pacific League. His 10 complete games and 2 shutouts also led all Buffalo's pitchers, and his 2.7 WAR was 3rd on the team after Atsushi Kodama and Junzo Sakine. Mickens and his wife would move into a luxurious apartment in Uehonmachi, Osaka, and Mickens would often play baseball with local kids at the park he trained at. This helped break down barriers with Buffalo's fans, and he quickly became one of the most popular players on the team. After a couple of rough starts to start the 1960 season, Mickens was cruising. On May 24th against the Toei Flyers, he had a shutout going in the 9th, but Junzo Sakine flubbed a 1-out Katsutoyo Yoshida grounder at first base, putting runners on 1st and 3rd with 1 out. Isao Harimoto grounded out to score the runner from 3rd, and then Hachiro Yamamoto hit a 2-run shot which scored Yoshida and himself. Mickens then got Jack Ladra out to end the game. Going over the score sheet after the game, something stood out to Mickens. He'd been credited with 2 earned runs against him. One for Soichiro Busujima, who scored on Harimoto's ground ball, and one for Yamamoto's 2-run shot. This confused him. If Sakine hadn't flubbed that ground ball, Harimoto's groundout would have ended the game. He'd been credited with 2 runs when he should have been credited with 0. If you're a new baseball fan and that sounded confusing, I'll try to explain it again. In baseball, if an error occurs in an inning, it still kinda counts as an out. So if there's an error in an inning, any scoring that happens after the second out is made doesn't count against the pitcher's ERA. Because in an ideal world, that error would have been an out and the inning should be over. So all those runs are credited as unearned. Because, in a roundabout way, it wasn't the pitcher's fault that they happened. It was the fault of the fielder who botched the play. However, in Japan at the time, if a runner reached base on an error, only the run they represented would count as unearned, because they should be out, but anyone who scored after them would be counted. In short, if there's 2 outs and a guy gets on with an error, and the next guy comes up and hits a 2-run home run, MLB would not charge the pitcher with any runs, whereas NPB at the time would have charged him with 1 run for the batter, but not for the guy on base. Make sense? This interpretation upset Mickens because he was entitled to a bonus if he kept his ERA below 2.5, and because of his rough first 2 starts, every run counted. So he grabbed the team translator and went to visit Pacific League scoring chief Ikuji Yamanouchi. He brought the MLB rulebook with him to explain his reasoning. Yamanouchi was initially dismissive, claiming that Mickens was just interpreting the rules his own way. But, after calling some of MLB's scorers, he realized that Mickens was right. So, he took his findings to NPB Commissioner Nobori Inon. Inon agreed with the interpretation of the rules, but since they were already 2 months into the season, he proposed pushing the rule change to the off-season, which would avoid the long bureaucratic hassle of rescoring hundreds of games. So, the rule change would be brought in for 1961, and would be unofficially dubbed the Mickens Rule. Mickens wouldn't have to worry about the bonus. 1960 would end up being the best season of his career, as he put up a 2.24 ERA and led the Buffaloes in WAR with 5.1, making his first All-Star team. Mickens would play for the Buffaloes until he retired due to injury after the 1963 season. He would end up coaching UCLA's baseball team until 1989. He'd pass away in 2019 at the age of 88. Thanks to the Kintetsu Buffaloes' preference for foreign hitters over foreign pitchers, Mickens remains the best foreign pitcher the team ever had. Although if not for the Buffalo's Blue Wave merger at the end of the 2004 season, Jeremy Powell would have definitely surpassed him. Although Stanka and Bach were by far the better remembered pitchers of the era, Mickens' impact on NPB history was just as great.
Buffaloes,